Welcome to the Tradies in Business podcast. Join your host, Nicole Cox, as she dives into the real stories, tips, secrets, and stuff-ups from guests both inside and outside the trade world. Nick is here to help you break free from the grind, reduce money stress, and build a trade business that truly works for you. So grab a brew, put your phone on silent, and get ready to be inspired.
Hello, listeners. Welcome back to the Tradies in Business podcast. We are in Tradie Month. I didn't even know there was such a thing until we started Tradies in Business. And you're looking for all those special occasions that we get to celebrate the amazing people that are tradies. And my most exciting part of Tradie Month this month is that means we're bringing you two real tradie stories. So to join me for my second real tradie story this month, Reece Gately, or as we call you, Mr. Reece G. Come on down. How are you, Reece?
Good, Nick. How are you, mate?
Really, really well. Thank you. Reece, you've got such an interesting story. You have a very different pathway into the trades, one that I don't reckon a lot of people can say that they have experienced. But before we get to there, how about you tell us, where was your first experience with the trades? Like when you think back to when you were a child, obviously your father was a tradie. Well, I say obviously, nobody else knows about that just yet. And is that the very first experience you can remember with the trades, or was there something else that pops into mind for you?
Yeah, I certainly have had a curly path to end up sitting here in high-vis and one that 10 years ago I don't think I could have seen or envisioned, but here we are. My dad owned, the business that I've now taken over. He got that from his grandfather, etc. And that was really kind of my first experience, was my dad being on the tools, the small business, the working 7 days a week, etc., the thing that everyone's doing. And so then, as I'm sure everyone whose dad owned a trade business, as soon as you're old enough to legally go on site, you've got a trowel in your hand, you're mixing buckets, you're doing what you need to do, whether it's that or even just around the factory, doing a few odds and ends around there while dad would pick you up from school, have to duck in via the factory to do something quickly. And, as a 14-year-old, you give him a hand. And then during the really busy periods, especially that seemed to coincide with kind of December, January and the school holidays, that's it. If you weren't at school, you were on the tool.
I had a really funny experience with my dad this weekend, and he was remembering how every Saturday or Sunday when we would go out, like we were new to Brisbane, and dad being a plasterer, he was always looking for new builders to be working with. And so every Saturday and Sunday it'd be, I just got to drop into this job on the way. And that was that's my childhood, is dropping into building sites. Right from when we moved to Brisbane, I was about 8. Prior to that, I don't actually remember Dad being a tradie much prior to that. And he was when we were in New South Wales. But when we moved here, it became part of our family life. And I think this is the thing with trade businesses, it's not just about the tradie going to work. Typically, it becomes tradie and partner and then the children, and it's such a family environment in one form or another. That doesn't necessarily mean we're all working in it, but I guarantee when the time comes and you have kids, they'll be helping you out on the school holidays as well.
100%. If I had to do it, they have to.
100%. I'm very good at cleaning plaster buckets still, and I am the best sweeper on site. I have a reputation for me and my broom. Maybe that's not what I want to share here on the podcast. Reece, okay, so growing up, you were helping out Dad. Was it in your mind that, I'm asking a leading question, and was it in your mind that you would end up in the position you are now, or was that like the furthest thing for you?
It was absolutely not even close on the radar. And that was a bit of who I was, but also what Dad did and didn't want for me, because Dad vehemently didn't want me to, do what he had to do, for lack of a better word. He didn't want me to grow up working 6-7 days a week, doing everything he had to do in dangerous environments, destroying his body. He quite aggressively didn't want any of us to do it. And so outside of the occasional dropping by the factory and going out when he needed an extra set of 16-year-old hands to carry buckets and wash buckets and sweep up, etc., he really tried to shield us from all of that. And then when it was talking about future careers, he was like, I don't want you to do this. I want you to find something completely different. I want you to enjoy a nice life in an air-conditioned office and not scrounging around inside dirty, hot spaces in, middle of January. So no, if I put a lot of money on where I'd end up, I didn't think it would be here, but
Here we
life
are.
goes as life goes, and you flow the flow.
That's so true. So tell us about the pathway to get to this point, Reece. Where did it start for you?
Sure. Well, I guess I'll talk about where Wardrobe Refractories was, which kind of leads into
Mhm.
where I ended up. Yes, like I said, Wardrobe Refractories was my granddad was kind of the leading hand when the business started. Then the business owner passed away. My granddad kind of got the keys thrust upon him. Then, granddad was doing that for 15 odd years. Dad kind of had a bit of a quiet period in work. He stepped in 5 years later. Granddad did much the same, basically said to Dad, "Oh, you know what you're doing with the business, right?" And he went, "Yeah, I think so." And he went, "Good, it's yours now." Threw the keys at him and out the door he went. Dad ran that for 30, 40 years. Well, by the time he retired, it was 40 years. But he took over 77, 80, somewhere in that area.
Mm.
As I said, then, and that's kind of where the business was, and that's what that was doing. Then when I was growing up, we were all told in high school, if you don't get a UAI or ATAR for the younger people, you will basically live a rubbish life. You will be on $14 an hour until you die. Your back will give out by the time you're 40. Uni's the only way forward. And if you don't go to uni, you're going to be a delivery man, and that's all you're going to be doing.
Yep.
And that's what my dad wanted, as I was saying. He really didn't want me to go into the trades. He didn't want to see me doing that. He wanted me to live that luxurious life, as they were all told.
Mm-hmm.
So outside of me helping for, the big shutdowns, like I was mentioning, I ended up finding myself going to university to study chemistry. I was quite passionate about it. I still am, don't get me wrong. But that's what I was doing, studying chemistry. I ended up following that through, finishing my PhD in chemistry, looking at 3D printing and looking at printing knees and cartilage and stuff like that for people. And then I realized, that academic life wasn't for me. It was very, I like helping people. I like applicably helping people, and half the academics is more doing stuff for the sake of doing it. So I tended away from that and more towards helping researchers do what they had to do.
Mm-hmm.
It was around kind of that time that my dad was losing interest in running the business. When my mum passed away in 2010, he kind of really lost a lot of interest in running the business.
Naturally.
And so I kind of approached him 2016 odd and said, "Look, I think it's time for you to step back, enjoy the life that you've worked for, et cetera, et cetera. How about you start transitioning me and I'll run the business." He wasn't quite ready to retire at that point. And then about 5 years later, it was February 2020.
Yep.
What an innocent time that was.
I reckon.
Was when he kind of sat me down again and said, "Hey, a handful of years ago, you asked, can I take over?" And he said, "Is that offer still valid?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." He said, "Yeah, look, let's look towards transitioning you in. But let's just wait. I've heard about this funny virus that's taking over a few places, so I'm not quite sure what's going to happen in the next 6 months. Let's see what happens." And a tumultuous 6 months later is, when I swapped my office working clothes for high-vis clothes.
That's a huge transition. I can't even specifically because of the kind of work that you do, Reece. Like this, you could not get more polar opposites. It's almost like going from heaven to hell. You're in this beautiful air conditioned office where it's very comfortable to literally fire burning hell in the kind of work that you often do. Reece, can you explain for our listeners what it is that is your trade and maybe get a little in depth because I think a lot of people, it's an unfamiliar trade for many.
Yeah, sure. We I guess the way that I phrase it to people is basically if it gets hot, I work on them. And by hot, I don't mean, 200 degrees. Don't get me wrong, we do that absolutely. But kind of the coldest environments we tend to work on when operating, obviously, are about kind of 800 plus degrees. The units that run at 650 are our, ambient temperature units, I say in air quotes. Um, there's not really a trade in Australia for it anymore specifically.
Mhm.
The closest it gets is bricklaying,
Yep.
because there's a lot of bricklaying that we do, but it's more closer to lagging, using rock wool and fiberglass and stuff like that, or even rendering using like fatty concretes. So kind of what we do is we're high temperature insulation.
Mhm.
And as I said, that can go from anywhere from really, really, really hot pipes to burning chambers to or cremators to boilers. And it can vary from, we've done small hot water boilers for office blocks, or the big art gallery in Sydney, stuff like that,
Yep.
um, all the way up to units that run entire plants, units that are the main burn chamber is bigger than most people's houses,
Wow.
um, and anywhere and everything in between, basically. Um,
So, Reese, is most of your work like shutdown work because there's a problem, you're going in to solve a problem? Or is it preventative work to prevent a problem from arising?
what it is or what it should be.
Let's talk
Look,
about what it is.
what it is a majority of it is breakdown work. It is, what are you doing tomorrow? We need your help. Hey, something's just failed. There is smatterings of preventative maintenance.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, especially around that Christmas period, Easter period, school holidays, those big periods of shutdowns where the whole plant will shut down for a couple of weeks. Um, but a majority of what we do in particular is emergency breakdown. I need you out here this afternoon. I need you out here tomorrow morning. Where we differ, because there's not many companies in Australia that do what we do. Um, I'd probably put the number at about a dozen across the country. Um, where we differ from a lot of the other guys is we do kind of those smaller jobs, those unplanned breakdowns, as opposed to the big 60 guys on site for 2 weeks, day shift, night shift. They knew about the shutdown 9 months in advance and they knew the exact scope of work 9 months in advance.
Yeah.
A lot of the time ours is two guys on site rushed out. They don't know what the unit is made of. They don't know what the lining is. They don't know what's wrong, but all they know is that the nice steel casing is now glowing red and that probably shouldn't do that. So there's a lot of going there, figuring out what's wrong, what was in there, what needs to be installed. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Must make it really hard for you to plan. Like, I think some of our listeners could sit and think, okay, there's only 12 companies. This sounds like a gold mine. That's an amazing opportunity. And I want to draw attention to just how difficult emergency work can be when it is the backbone of your business, because you can be, as you have experienced recently, well and truly stuck into a job. And suddenly you've got some of your major suppliers that you do maintenance work with other times of the year really need you right now, and you can't possibly get there. Reece, can you take us through some of the complexities that you face on a day-to-day basis with the style of work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you rightfully pointed out, just yesterday finished it was a major boiler that got converted from coal to gas burners. But that was, this is 6 weeks that we were on site, which a lot of our jobs are 2 days. So that had a lot of us locked out for a pretty long period. There's nothing harder than when you're away and you get a call from clients saying, look, we're stuffed without you. We really need a hand. We're all hands on deck on this current shutdown. And look, the complexities are around. There's a number of things that do my head in that I've had to go with the flow and learn how to go with the flow. Coming from a science, a chemistry background, it's all very prescribed, very organized. And it's, in particular, the materials I was working on was, they were nanometers in size. I was taking micrograms of this stuff. It was all precision, calibrated, considered, to then come into organized chaos that isn't always organized. Um, it's a lot of the complexities are around the materials that we use are cement based, so they have a very short shelf life,
Mhm.
12 months. Um, there's no major manufacturers in Australia that make this stuff. So if I'm out of material, it could be, if my supplier doesn't have it, it's either ring around and find another couple or it's wait 4 months. Um, so that's absolutely one of the complexities, is just around just materials and storage and the sheer volume that we've got to keep here just to satisfy, jobs as they crop up. There's also timetabling issues, if that's the nice way to word it, which is we will go 2 weeks without having a single job, where it's all of us sweeping the factory for the 15th time and washing the cars for the 4th time and maintaining that tool that's been maintained within an inch of its life, to all of a sudden having 5 jobs on at the same day, because I don't know why, but that's just how it always happens to work. So it then means that I've got to have a large amount of materials for those just in case jobs. It means which I'm slowly starting to rebuild, is a list of casuals that I can trust to call on. And because of what we do, it's high risk work. We're pretty much only industrial. We occasionally do commercial work, so it's high risk, high documentation, high paper. You've got to have your tickets, your assurances. So it's making sure that there are casuals that I know, like, and trust the quality of their craftsmanship, which, don't get me wrong, every tradie would be the exact same, but it's making sure that they've got their tickets and that I can trust them to be safe when they're on a job.
Mm.
Because ultimately, if I'm inside of a confined space, my life is in the hands of the people outside. If they're not doing their job properly, my life's at risk. And I've certainly had a few points where the sentry has saved me from potentially going to hospital because they're paying attention to something that I couldn't see.
Wow.
So it means that all of this lovely idea of planning workflows and so on and so on goes out the window, and you've just got to take it one day at a time as best as you can possibly manage.
I want to acknowledge that it's really hard to run a business that way with the constant uncertainty. Like, there's nothing that's certain in your day other than, I can't even say what you're doing for the day because that can change in a moment. It is a really challenging way to run a business. And I'd love to talk about staff because I think that's one of those areas that we all struggle with in business, particularly trade businesses. It's really, really hard to get staff. And the amount of complexity for you with, you're right, the safety aspect of what you're doing needs to be paramount every single time. And so, therefore, building that pool of casuals that won't necessarily have other works going on. So, therefore, perhaps they're looking at other areas that they might like to work in, or they're going out to work for some of the bigger players in the field. It can make it really hard to rely on them because they're preoccupied. And so then what do you do? I mean, are you forced in a position where you're having to take on substandard workers, or are you stuck having to say no to people with the kind of dream work that you really want to take on? Like, that's a very complex part of your business to cope with the ebb and flow of the workflow. So, Reece, how do you, maybe you can share with us, with your pool of casual workers, how do you keep them engaged in between work that you do have available for them?
That is a ongoing improvement, because you are right. I've got to have casuals that when I need them, but when I don't, I don't. There's not. I am looking at putting on another full timer because we're kind of just on that tipping point. But a lot of the times we might go from having, you know, not enough work for 2 full timers to having more work than 20 can handle
Yeah.
within the span of a day.
Mhm.
Um, but then that might not happen again for another 6 months. We might have a week's worth of bucket load and then nothing.
Yeah.
I've tried a number of different things. One was, at one point I was using kind of substandard workers,
Mhm.
using guys that, but getting them on bucket carrier duty,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word. Um, that did work, but it puts a lot of onus on the tradie or whoever's running the job
Yeah.
to make sure all the gear's right, everything's there. I've got to double, triple, quadruple check the safety stuff, the lockout, make sure everything is there, make it as robust as possible to make sure that if anything goes wrong, even though I've got my head inside of a furnace, inside of a cremator, whatever it happens to be, I can still make sure that the whole area is safe,
Mm.
assuming the person that's watching me is, only, let's call it, half as effective as I'd want them to be. That worked for a while, but
Mm.
um, it ends up getting quite exhausting. It was exhausting for me and for my guys having, your backup being not a remarkable backup.
Yep.
And you can get away with it if you've got 6 or 8 guys on a site and, 1 or 2 of them are good for carrying a bucket and that's about it. Then that's, it works. It's perfectly fine. But it's more when you've got 2 guys on site and one of them doesn't know the first thing about what you're doing that it gets challenging.
Yeah.
What I'm kind of trialing to and moving more towards now is, at least the way the refractory industry works as a whole is a lot of people don't have full-time jobs doing what we do. I would say, again, across Australia, there's maybe, I'd say 50 people, 60 people that do it full-time.
Wow.
3/4 of the workforce is casuals that'll go do a 3-month FIFO shutdown.
Yep.
So it's finding those guys where they might spend 6 to 9 months away, but then finding the times when they're not away and then just building up such a number of it that if I need 3 or 4 of them, I might have 30 on my list and I just keep calling until I find someone. The other good thing is that a lot of the workers that we rely on, again, because bricklaying is about as close to a trade as it gets for us, a lot of brickies will, if they have a rain day, for argument's sake,
Yes.
if I know it's going to be raining, I'll give them a call because they know they're not going to be on site.
Yeah.
So they can come have a play with us and things like that. So it's about just building up a big enough pool, knowing who's in the pool and what they do.
Yes.
Yeah, well, even for this big shut, one of the guys we had with us, he has been doing refractories for forever, 18 years or something. But in between shuts, he tends to just do brickworking 1 week at a time, outdoor bricklaying. And so he said, if I don't have any work, I'll just go do some outdoor bricklaying for a couple of weeks until you've got something else for me. So that's about the best I can manage. Does it always work? No, but it gets us across the line most of the time.
I would think it wouldn't necessarily be a career of choice either because of the uncertainty for a team member, not knowing that they consistently have work. When you're trying to have a family or purchase a house or something, that could be really quite intimidating. I can understand why people would gravitate out of the trade, even if they had fallen into it at one point or another. Um, Reece, the other nightmare that I know that you face, and given the safety aspect of what you do, compliance must be a nightmare.
That's a very, very, very nice way to put it. Yes.
Do you want to talk us through, I guess, the amount of compliance and how that actually impacts the operations in the business on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, there's, again, because we're industry, it's, you've got to have 15 forms of paperwork if you want to walk to the toilet sort of thing. And especially some of the sites that we work on, we do military sites as well. So then you've got that added layer of not just paperwork, but complexity. And there's also a lot of like intellectual property around, well, military sites, are pretty big on it, but a lot of other places, safety, security. So absolutely, it can be downright exhausting. And quite honestly, I think that's half the reason why my dad came to me and said, do you want to run this business? Because
Yes.
he was a tradesman, he wasn't a bureaucrat. And he said the amount of paperwork that he has to spend time doing now just did his head in because he just wants to go and lay bricks. That's he loves it. He's great at it. He still loves it.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of the time, what that ends up looking like, and this is a system we're constantly refining, and I'm in the process of further refining, is it's about having safety documentation that's broad enough that it covers 90% of what you do, but has enough wiggle room, whether it's down to our safe work method statement, for argument's sake. We'll have one of those that covers 90% of our work, and then there's just a little area just to fill out the specifics for that job for that location. Then there's all the other, there's the hot works, there's your working from heights, confined space permits, there's making sure gas meters are calibrated, in date, bump tested, checked. And also pretty much every refractory material in the world is silica based. You're very, very, very rare that you'll find a refractory material that doesn't contain some sort of silica. And with the ever growing concerns on that, it's about, for me, it's about, because safety is something I take a lot of pride in. Dad was always quite on the forefront of it. Um, in all the times that I was working with Dad, with the other guys, because, as I said, I was on site when I was 16, 17, helping out. We've had no major incidents, in the past 30 years sort of thing. We've had no major injuries, nothing like that. A handful of hospitalizations I can think of, but it's low level hospitalizations that people recover from in a couple of days.
Wow.
Um, for me, it's about on the ground level, even before you talk about the safety documentation, it's about keeping that culture of safety first.
Yeah.
Um, and not just saying safety first and then saying, anyway, you've got 4 hours to do 8 hours worth of work, so get it done.
Yes. Yeah.
It's about saying and acting safety first.
Yeah.
Um, but then on the back end, making sure that that paperwork, the quality assurance and all of that sort of stuff follows.
Yes.
As I said, it's an ever ongoing. I think honestly, probably every year I go through and review all of our safety documentations. We're in the middle of moving to a fully digital system that should hopefully be faster and better and
Mhm.
further documented. But the amount of times that I spend reading safety documents and improving them and doing
Mm.
that is more than I care to think about.
It's not the most exciting part of what you do, that's for sure.
No, not by a long shot.
No. Now, Reece, you've been working with us here at Tradies in Business for quite a few years now. I think we must be over 3. Um, what would you
Wow.
say is the biggest point of difference between business, how it was before and how it is now?
So as soon as Dad and I had that conversation, kind of 2020, the first thing I did was start looking up, various, because I thought to myself, I know the basics on how a business is run, but the actuality of it all, there is so much I would not have a clue of. And so it was about then when I first started listening to the podcast, etc.
And here you are. How cool
And
is
here
that?
I am 5 years later.
I love it.
um, for me, the biggest difference was I knew what needed to be done.
Mhm.
I knew where the problems were. The problems were quite evident to me. I knew where not problems, that's a negative mindset, where the gaps or rooms for improvement. How does that sound?
Oh, that's nice language. Thank you, Reece.
It was quite obvious to me where those gaps were.
Uh-huh.
Um, but how to go from having a gap to filling that gap
Yeah.
was the challenging part. Now, whether that was the actual, hey, here's a document, follow this document, and it fixes it. Whether it's if I had $1 for every time you said this to me, why are you doing this? This isn't your job. Pay someone else to do it, and they'll do it in half the time at half the price.
Yeah.
Um, it was just knowing how to go from where I was to where I knew I should be.
Yeah.
Um, was one of the biggest things from an actual. That's from a business point of view, from a strictly running the business.
Mm.
But from I don't know, a non-business, a mindset, a headspace, whatever else you want to say, was the big part for me was knowing that everything you think you're the only one going through is absolutely not true. As for you might think, because it is lonely. It's lonely running a business, and especially my partner doesn't work in the business. She's got her own thriving career. Um, and so it's basically, it's me, and me.
Mm.
Um, so having people to share that burden with, which isn't me ranting at my partner over dinner for 2 hours while she's sitting there listening to me talk about how annoying XYZ is for the 15,000th time this week. Um, it's sharing that burden with other people that are in the same position. And you always think the amount of times I've thought to myself, no, I'm the only one doing this. I'm in a specialized trade in a specialized area and a blah, blah, blah. And then I'll put something up in the Facebook group and about 19 people have jumped on the post saying, oh my God, me too. Or other people saying, yeah, I used to deal with that, but that's just how I don't anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're the two big things is the physical, actual business stuff, but then the headspace and knowing it's not just you. You're not stuffing up. It's just how it is.
Part of the learning process. There's just so much
Exactly.
power in the vulnerability and the reward from the vulnerability. And As you well know, this is why we curate the community that we have so closely so that nobody feels unable to be vulnerable. And it certainly takes a while when you're not used because the trades are so insular and we are not vulnerable and you can't, there's the tall poppy syndrome and it's an uncomfortable space to own a business. It really is. And so creating a community where you can come and celebrate your wins without having to be humble, like actually screaming from the rooftop when something's working for you, but also knowing that you can be supported when things aren't going so great, or you're having a tough day, or somebody's let you down, or somebody's not paid, or whatever that looks like for you in business. Just being able to share that and others coming around you and rallying the support is incredible for the mindset that is required to run a true business. Otherwise, we get really focused, well, firstly on ourselves, which is why the industry continues to be so insular. We're not going, I wouldn't have never have done it when we were building. There's no way I would have gone to my builder mates and we had lots and said, hey, things are really shit and I don't know what to do and I don't know where to go. That would never even occur to me to do that because that's not the way the industry is set. And yet when we come together in a group, and I think it helps having such a diversity of trades and business types, when we come together in a group and we can share that perspective, the support is mind blowing. And that support encourages you to continue to think of your problems as a business owner and not to dip down into the weeds and be stuck trying to fix it all as a tradie, which is something that we all do. Reece, you've had some
Absolutely.
magnificent changes in the time that we've been working together, and you've got some, well, at least I see it as some pretty clear focus about where you want to take this business and what's next for you. Do you want to share with our listeners what you're working on at the moment and what your current big focus is?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a lot of awful lot of things I have on the radar. A lot of things that have been on the radar that have been ticked off, and a few more that are continuing adding. But all with I guess all with the same goal in mind. Um, uh, where we were as a business, we our big jobs, like I said, are our competitors' baby jobs. They're the ones that half the time we get them because our competitor couldn't be bothered to touch them because they're so small. But they're the big ones that keep me up, night in, night out. Um, from on that point of view, it's not too long ago we recently purchased, some new equipment that allows us to do larger jobs, or will allow us to do the jobs we're doing, but in shorter time frames, which is better for the client, better for us. There's a lot of added service, a lot of gaps in the market I can see that I'm trying to be the person to fill those gaps. Um, but the biggest, I guess, the big shift, and this is where it's all at, is my dad. Look, calling the business he had a man in a van is incredibly unfair to what he'd built.
100%.
But he'd always designed the business to run through him in some
Yeah.
way, shape, or form. Whether it was on the tools, whether it was off the tools, it was designed to run through him.
Mhm.
So I guess the phrasing is being self-employed versus being a business owner.
Yep.
I'm looking to make that shift more into a business, more into systemization, and into where I can duck off for a week, duck off for a month, and the business still exists.
Mhm.
Personally, I want to get to the site to the point where I turn up on site and the whole job goes a bit slower because I'm there. Um, Not because that means I'm a burden, which I mean, I technically would have been a burden, but more to the point that that means that I'm not the best refractory installer in the business, and I don't want to be, because that means I want to hire people that are far better at doing that job than I
Mhm.
am. Now, what that looks like from in order to achieve that, it's looking at doing this thing called marketing that, we've never really touched. It's looking at, these new systems, this safety management system. Even when I first took over the business, Dad didn't have any form of job management system. And that was 2020, end of 2020, keep in mind. The job management system was a giant filing cabinet that I could sleep in. Um, so even moving that stuff forward so it can be managed and dealt with, systemized, safely, effectively, quality assured. So we're doing the same quality, because that's really why we've been in business for so long, is we don't cut corners. And I know every tradie says the same thing, don't get me wrong, but we don't cut corners. We don't stuff around. We make sure we do the job to the best of the quality. And I've always, reaching out, as we're talking about, with more casuals coming from other refractory companies, every single person that's come to work with me has said pretty much the same thing from the larger mobs to come with us. They say it's insane how much the clients just say, there's the boiler, see you in 2 days. And he said they don't come around, they don't talk, they don't anything. They point you in the direction, they say, park your cars there, here's the forklift, see you later.
Mm.
As opposed to having either a fully designated paid QA guy floating around or the client floating around or a maintenance manager. He said they just leave you. And don't get me wrong, part of the reason is because they're used to, Rio Tinto sites. They're used to large, highly regulated sites. But more importantly, and this is what I say to them, it's because we've built 40 years of trust with these clients, I've been coming to this site since I was 17.
Yeah.
They know what they're getting with us because we've been here for 20 years. And it's that trust in our ability to do our job even when we're not being watched.
Yep.
Which is what keeps us where we are. So it's about making sure that culture stays throughout any changes I put in, which
I
is
love that.
also quite an important part.
Yeah, extremely so. Reece, I'm going to ask you a question. I've never asked one of my real tradies before. It's
Uh-oh.
because you are you're the tool king. I'm going to call you the tool king. You've got all these names now, Paul Reece. Gee. What's your favorite tool for your business? So not a physical tool. I'm talking about the administration type tools. You've introduced us to some tools I didn't know existed and now our entire community use. And I think it comes from the academic basis that you have had for so much of your life. And so I reckon that we could really blow some people's minds today with a couple of the tools that you use regularly that really help you be more efficient in what you do.
I thought you were going to say, if it's physical equipment, it's my new raid gun. I'm quite in love with it and it's incredible fun. So
Good.
currently that's one of my favorite tools. Look, I've got a few that I lean on pretty routinely. One I shared with you not too long ago that seems to be a favorite, Goblin Tools.
Everybody loves this thing. It is incredible.
If you haven't gotten onto it, get onto it. It's Goblin Tools. It's an AI. You just basically go to the website, you punch in what you want to do, and then it breaks it down into a series of steps for you. And if you're not happy with the series of steps, you can get it to break it down further, you can honestly put in, how do I make a cup of coffee? And you can break it down into 40 steps if you were that way oriented,
It's amazing.
It helps remove the immobilization of, I know what I need to do, but I don't know how the hell to do it. Throw it in there, let it break it down, and then you've got simple 2-minute steps every single time. The other one that I used to use a lot, I've gotten a bit lax on it because I've been on the tools versus in the office, and I've noticed it majorly affecting my office time, is actually using your calendar.
Yeah.
Now it's whether it's for, say, something like time blocking, whether it's using your calendar and a to-do list, working those two together.
Mhm.
I used to be very, very, very avid time blocker and a very avid to-do list. And whether it was, I have a giant whiteboard normally on the wall behind me, whether it's a written to-do list on a whiteboard or a digital one, whatever tickles your fancy. Um, that I found through my productivity through the roof. It meant when I sat at a computer, I smashed things out.
Yeah.
It was always very counterintuitive because you'd have to spend time to plan your time to save time.
Uh-huh.
I'd spend 20 minutes of a morning organizing my day to save time. And so I thought to myself, that's stupid. How about I just do the things rather than talking about doing the things? But then the amount of time you find yourself, you have no idea what the next step is, no idea what else is on your list. You've got 100 different things. They've all leaked out your brain because you've been focusing on this one task. And then the things you had to do disappear out the window. Or you go, I'm not sure what I'll do, so I'll just browse on my phone for the next 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Or whatever it happens to look like. But even something as simple as a to-do list, time blocking, even I just talk to my phone a lot of the time and I say, throw this on my to-do list. I've got a Google phone, so it hooks up with Keep Notes. It makes a tick list. Simple, quick, easy, unbelievably effective.
Yeah. You're preaching to the converted, but I'm hoping there are a lot of people listening in. They're thinking, okay, maybe I need to give my calendar and a to-do list another thought. Reece, thank you so much for joining me today. I've really enjoyed throwing a spotlight onto a part of the trade that, look, even when I Google it, there's not a whole bunch of information out there. It's really interesting to see how you do things, but also how complex it can be. This is a really different kind of trade business than so many of the others that we see. Not that there aren't complexities in every single business. And when you weigh up the kind of complexities that you face every day, it certainly makes for a very challenging business style. And I don't know anybody better suited to the challenge than you. Reece, if our listeners would like to find out more about who you are and what you do, where can they find you?
Yeah, sure. I find myself, unfortunately, spending more and more time on LinkedIn. So that's probably one of the better places to find me. I am on all the socials, especially like me, myself, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, but the business is across all of them. If not, if you've got questions or whatever, feel free to reach out by email, which is just Reece, REECE. I don't have any of this no vowel nonsense,
Okay.
Reece, at wardroberefractories.com.au.
We'll make sure all of those links are in the show notes for you. Reece, thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you, and I've thoroughly enjoyed our chat today.
Happy to spend the time, Nick. Anytime, mate.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Tradies in Business podcast with Nicole Cox. Find out more about today's guest, tools for your trade business, and other cool stuff at tradiesinbusiness.com.au.